the Coens. I've done 2 movies with the Coen Brothers. They've transformed me. The Coen Brothers effectively gave me a career as well. So they're as influential over me as pretty much anyone I've met doing what I do. They've made me better as a human being because Joel and Ethan are wonderful people. They're as generous as their films are, and that's what I think that's what's great about their films is how generous they are.
Welcome to Locarno Meets, a movie podcast brought to you by UBS from the Locarno Film Festival. Tim Blake Nelson is one of the most recognizable faces in American cinema today. This year, he's joined the jury at Locarno Film Festival, and he's debuting his new feature, Bang Bang.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Congratulations on Bang Bang, your film which you're showing in Locarno. It's a boxing movie, and so I was thinking about boxing movies today, and I ended up watching this footage from 1894 of a boxing match.
Marquess of Queensberry.
One guy's doing Queensberry, and the other one's kind of all over the place. But I was really thinking, it really is the most cinematic sport, and it really does have the most dramatic characters. Did it excite you to be kind of joining the canon of cinematic boxers?
It certainly did excite me to play this character. It always excites me to do genre movies. You can argue that any movie is effectively a genre movie at this point because they fit into different categories, and you can call those categories genres. So this is a sports movie and a boxing movie, just like there are westerns and horror films and heist thrillers and action thrillers and superhero movies, comedies, romantic comedies. And what I like about genres is that they give the films an aesthetic limit situation, parameters. And the movie is always in conversation, as any movie is with all other movies, but specifically with movies in the genre. So a boxing movie is always in conversation with other boxing movies. Also, however, I think that it's useful to transpose the since it's in a specific genre, to transpose the storytelling immediately into something philosophical.
Sure.
So that in a sports movie, a boxing movie, which is about, let's say, winning, all right, because in sports movies it's about winning, then philosophically you ask, well, okay, so what is the movie trying to say about what it takes to win in life? And I love addressing movies specific to their genre on those terms. And what I really like about Bang Bang is that it has a real philosophical point to make. It's a sad one. It's not quite the level of Schopenhauer, but essentially what Bang Bang examines is what it costs to win, and how ultimately in life, because in the sport of boxing, again, you're transposing it to something philosophical, vaulting it up to that, that yes, you can win, but ultimately you're going to lose a lot more than you won. It's going to cost you more than any joy that you experienced momentarily. Because that's ultimately the message of Bang Bang. You're what the sport of boxing costs almost every practitioner of it is really shoved in your face by the film.
Well, yeah, I mean, you talk about it being in relationship with other boxing movies. I'd say the majority of them are about losing.
Yeah.
And I wondered if this was specifically in conversation with Fat City. Because there's some good comparisons there. You've got the elder boxer who's kind of on their way out. You've got the younger kid who really isn't quite as focused, but is on the way up, and you feel probably will never box again by the end of the picture. And you've got this dark and upsetting issue with substance abuse running through both movies. I wondered if that had occurred to you.
Well, Fat City was absolutely a siren song for me in this film. It's one of my favorite films, let alone boxing movies. It's a very different film from Raging Bull, but I think Raging Bull also addresses some of those issues. Fat City is remarkable also as an early independent film. The territory it explores, in terms of the seediness and the grit.
It's new Hollywood from an old master.
Yeah, and exactly. It's John Huston movie, but he's absolutely an early auteur in the French tradition in that movie, and he's allowed to make the movie he wants, in part because I don't think it was that expensive, and he was John Huston after all, and you're allowed a character like Susan Tyrrell's Barfly, which is one of the great performances in American cinema as far as I'm concerned. And you even, to get to go into that bar in color is absolutely spectacular. You could say Requiem for a Dream, not Requiem for a Dream, Requiem for a Heavyweight is another precursor. Also, great performance by Jackie Gleason in that movie.
And I mean, your character in this film is a stressful figure. He is angry, he is upset, he's unpleasant to pretty much everyone. He's quite funny, but I wondered how much of a tightrope it is for you to walk that line as an actor while still allowing the audience to relate to him, because I did, and I don't know if that says something damaging about me, but is that a tough line to walk?
I've got to give a lot of the credit to Will Janowitz, the writer. I think he wrote a character who can't help but be charming no matter how hard he tries to push people off. And it became my job as an actor to stay true to that within the parameters of the movie that the director, Vincent Grashaw, wanted to make. And in doing so, I made the decision never to try to be liked. And that was strangely liberating as an actor. Basically, to leave that to others and to play the truth of the character as he was written. I think by doing that in a strange way, the more he tries not to be liked, the more weirdly charming he perhaps is.
It's such a kind of well-worn Hollywood story that I hesitate to ask about it. The boxing transformation, from De Niro eating pasta to Will Smith getting in incredible shape. But your transformation is great, so I do have to ask about it. I think I'm not sure you would have leapt to mind as somebody without thinking about it that I would have cast as a boxer, and yet you're so believable and you're in such great shape then. I wonder how much work had to go into
it.
It
was a lot of work, but I don't look at it really as work anymore. I'm learning to play mandolin right now for a movie, and it's incredibly frustrating, particularly at the age of 60 when my hands and fingers aren't as dexterous as they used to be, and I've got to pluck those little strings and make these little chords. But I look forward to doing it every day. I looked forward to going to the gym and training every day. Because I'm getting to live the life I dreamed of, and you're just not going to find me complaining about any of these roles I get to play. But it was a lot of work, hours every day, 6 days a week for several months, and a lot of time. not only with the physical training down at the gym, but talking with people and absorbing a mindset that isn't really my own. I'm not a particularly confrontational person. And yeah, I'm already slender, but I got even more slender, and certainly needed to bulk up a little bit. But he's a featherweight.
Yeah.
So it was okay. And I try to keep myself in the sort of shape where within 3 or 4 months I can pivot to any kind of role physically.
How do you do that?
I just part of my job every day as an actor, because even if you work a lot, you're mostly not working.
Sure.
And so I just make sure that I'm in shape and I take care of myself. That's all. It's not it's again, I'm not complaining about it. I love it. There are worse things than a part of your job being to stay healthy.
No, that's good. I mean, it would theoretically help every single job in the world.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
So Bang Bang is...
Sumo wrestler, maybe not.
I think that's a certain type of physicals, a perfection. Bang Bang's your character's, I guess, what do you call it? Stage name?
Nom de guerre.
Nom de guerre, yeah. Nom de box. And this comes after Old Henry, a great Western. And Buster Scruggs, also a great Western, but very different type of Western. Mm-hmm. You're in your title character phase. Does it feel great to be doing all these kind of leading roles, having these films built around you?
It's an odd sweet spot in which I find myself. These are, well, with the exception of the Coen Brothers movie, which they can have anybody they want. But I happen to be... we're very close friends, so I lucked out there. So they wrote this role for me. But a movie like Bang Bang and Old Henry as well, they're small enough to where they need an actor pretty much at my level to get that amount of financing. Mm-hmm. But if they want to get a bigger star, they're going to be priced out of that, or maybe a bigger star isn't going to want to take the risk with a young director. And I love those risks. I'm interested in taking them, and I feel as though at this point in my career I've done enough movies to where I can kiss a frog and it's not going to be a problem. That said, I'm very careful, and it was a no-brainer to do Old Henry. I thought it was a really interesting part. I really liked the director. And I felt the same way about Bang Bang.
I want to talk actually about the sort of the climax of the film, which is a scene I loved, the kind of middle-aged domestic boxing title bout. I'd never really seen anything quite like it. I wonder what the directors... I don't know. What do you think they were trying to say in that scene?
That, again, I go to the philosophical, and to me, it's catharsis. It's two characters who need to let go of the demons within them. And ultimately, I think they succeed in doing so. Bang Bang in particular is so desperate for it that he's been keeping himself in shape for decades so that this can happen for him. He says it. He says, I've been keeping myself at fighting weight. And he never really understood it, but this was why. And I think that we, ideally, each of us, not only need catharsis before our time is up, but hopefully we can find our way to it.
Do you find acting cathartic?
Sometimes I do, and sometimes, yeah. I suppose it just depends on the role. Bang Bang, I don't think was a cathartic character, and he lived on inside me a little bit in uncomfortable ways. It was a glide path out. I found myself confrontational in the weeks after playing the role, and not quick to anger, but quick to protect myself in certain ways. And maybe I was a little irascible.
And is that a risk? Is that a risk you're aware of when you go into any role?
It is, but not a serious one. I don't want to mislead and act like I'm some sort of a shaman. It's just acting. That's all it is. And you pick up the rhythms of these characters. You play a wisecracker, and then suddenly, if you're pretty good at it and you're serious about it, you can't help but take on those rhythms, and maybe for a few weeks afterwards, you're wisecracking a bit. It's that sort of thing. And I love that. I like trying on these different characters. It's just that when it's a character like Bang Bang, who doesn't care whether he's liked and he's confrontational, you want to get rid of that.
Sure. It doesn't look like a fun life.
I played a role, the one, 2 roles ago, and I had this. My wife called it my sad beard, and I just the role. It was a very morose, tragic character with this big beard, and we were both ready to get rid of him. Chain smoker too. It was not good.
I always think that the smoking is the benefit of being an actor with certain roles. You get to go back to bad habits you gave up as a youth.
Yeah.
So obviously most people know you as an actor, but you've got a successful directorial career as well. But you've got something that most directors don't have, whereas you've made films with Del Toro and the Coens and Spielberg and Terrence Malick. And I wonder, when you were working with, geniuses, legends of the form, does that change the way you think about directing and acting, I suppose?
Every acting job changes the way I feel about directing. Being on the jury at this festival has changed the way I feel about directing. Just watching 16 movies in 8 days from all over the world is changing me as a director. And then talking about them with other directors on the jury is changing me as a director. And certainly I've done 2 movies with Steven. I spent 5 months with Terry. The Coens, I've done 2 movies with the Coen Brothers. They've transformed me. The Coen Brothers effectively gave me a career as well. So they're as influential over me as pretty much anyone I've met doing what I do. And even more than just the technical aptitude that they display moment to moment on a set, they've made me better as a human being, because Joel and Ethan are wonderful people. They're as generous as their films are, and that's what I think that's what's great about their films, is how generous they are. They give you more often in 2 hours than most filmmakers will give you in 2 films. They can do it in one. The twists, the turns, the richness of the dialogue, the sound design. It's all the wardrobe. It's all so thoroughly and carefully curated, and also so full. But they're like that as people. And just being able to call them my friends, they've made me better as a human being. And then there's the fact that I'd been kicking around for 10 years doing mostly off-Broadway theater. I directed one movie. Actually, I directed two movies. Had just directed my second movie and was editing it when we did Oh Brother. So, sure, I was really grateful
Sure.
to get this break 10 years into my career as an actor. But it was also the right time to see two of the leading filmmakers in the world, the most decorated, the most well-regarded in world cinema. There's, being so humble and being so decent to their crew and so decent to their actors and so generous as people, just gave me a roadmap in terms of how to be if I were ever to have success. And I'm most grateful for that.
Did you audition for the role?
No.
How did it come into your
Well,
life?
we knew each other because they'd seen my first film and had given me feedback on it.
Cool.
One of my producers knew them and got them to watch the movie. And they liked it, and I guess had a lot of respect for it. And at about the same time, my wife was becoming friends with Frances McDormand because they were both volunteering at a theater organization for kids in Hell's Kitchen in New York City. And Fran said, Joel really likes Tim, and it's hard to find people Joel likes. And so it's hard for us to have friends who are couples. And so we started hanging out, and we became
It was a play
close.
date.
Yeah. And we started to hang out regularly. And when they were making Oh Brother, it was this odd situation in which they had, I think, 55 days to shoot it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a road movie, so that actually wasn't a lot of time. And they were going to do it widescreen, their first widescreen movie, because they wanted to do a lot of three shots.
Mm-hmm.
Just shots of the three of us, and so you have a widescreen, 235. And they knew they were going to have to. They knew they were going to do close-ups of George,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't want to have to do close-ups of the other two actors. So they'd written the role of Pete for Turturro, and they knew he wouldn't be an issue.
Sure.
He didn't care. And there were a lot of stars whom I won't name, but there was one who was one of the biggest movie stars in the world, and still is, who wanted the part of Delmar.
Really?
Yeah, he really wanted it. And they didn't want to have to stop and do close-ups to another movie star. So they wanted an unknown, because it was just going to make their life easier on the schedule. And also it worked in the casting vocabulary of the movie, because George is the star.
Sure.
He's Ulysses. And in the Odyssey, it's not Odysseus and his two sidekicks. So they were adding these sidekicks. And so only Odysseus was going to get the close-up, only Ulysses McGill. And so they said, let's get an unknown. And then Joel said, well, Tim has a weird face. and I think he'd be interesting. And I think Ethan, whom I didn't really know, said, well, can I see him act in something? And Thin Red Line had just come out. And I had been mostly cut out of Thin Red Line, but I was in it enough.
Everyone's cut out of the Thin Red Line.
And so they offered it to me.
And how about Buster Scruggs? Was that written for you?
Yeah.
That must be
Yeah.
quite a feeling.
Yeah, it was great. But I waited for. They gave it to me. Joel dropped that script off at my apartment. We lived on the same block, and he dropped it off, I think in 2002, and said, "You're Buster Scruggs. We're going to do this anthology movie, and we've written one other one for Turturro, and we need to write 4 others." and it took them
10 years.
I think 16 years, something like that. And then Turturro had aged out of his part, so they gave that to Harry Melling, and I still got to play Buster Scruggs, which they had a great time with that because it's all the jokes about how short he is. And, yeah.
You're on the jury at Locarno 2024. When you sit down with your other jury members, do you all have to agree on the parameters of what makes a good film? It's almost impossible thing to answer.
Well, we have a president of the jury. So there are 5 of us, and we have a fearless leader, the wonderful Austrian filmmaker Jessica Hausner. And she set certain parameters, and there's a protocol because she is, after all, Austrian. So she's got that Teutonic. She wants it organized, and that's a great boon. It's really
also her films are very organized. If you watch her films, I think I can imagine what it should be like.
And it's great. It's incredibly helpful. It's definitely not a free-for-all. It's pretty nicely regimented, and it's very helpful. And we're all respectful of the movies. I love the jury members. Right. And we each have a different perspective. So it's been a lot of fun. We had our first confab this morning to discuss the first 8 of the films we've seen, and it was a great 2 hours. And I'm learning a tremendous amount from them and how they see films. There's an East Indian director. There's an Italian actor. There's a Belgian producer. There's an Austrian writer-director, and then there's this clown. The American, or the septic, as the Brits say.
Tim Blake Nelson, thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.